All right. Thanks a lot, Tracy. So first off, welcome and thanks everyone for joining us. Manoj and I are really excited to have everyone here to talk about something that we're both really passionate about, and that is the role of the SDET here at GoDaddy. So for those that don't know me, I'm Phil Escobar. I run the quality engineering teams for the front of site and the e-com infrastructure that powers that. And I'm up here in Kirkland right now. Manoj, why don't you introduce yourself too?
Hi, everybody. I am Manoj Pahuja, and I'm one of the SDETs on Presence and Commerce team, working on website builders specifically.
Great. So before we start too, I want to be clear for everyone that isn't aware of the acronym. So SDET stands for Software Development Engineer and Test. There's some other terms that you'll hear often, quality engineer, quality assurance, things like that. But the role of SDET is and the term SDET is important because we really want to emphasize that these are development engineers on the teams. So go ahead and go next. So the first thing I want to do is make sure it's clear and answer two questions for everyone here. And first is just why we're having this talk in the first place. And the second one is to understanding why the SDET role specifically is so critical to GoDaddy's vision. Next. So why we're here, the SDET role itself is often confusing, and I think it's confusing for a few different reasons. First, there's the breadth of the role. The role really covers a lot of different things. Also, the way the SDET role is organized here at GoDaddy varies from team to team, and even within organizations or even down to the team level. And then I think primarily, though, one of the reasons why we get asked about it a lot and questions about it is just the evolving nature of the role, especially as we move more and more to being an agile company. So the primary things I want to shine a light on here is really talk about the principles that drive quality engineering and the SDET role here at GoDaddy, the many forms that role takes, how the role has evolved over time, and really clarify how this role fits into delivering high-quality products to our customers. So by the end of the talk, I really want to make sure everyone understands the role of the SDET in an agile world, the importance of looking at the end-to-end experience, and how best to maximize this role within the different Scrum teams. Next. So why is the SDET role specifically important? There's a big overlap between what I think makes the role so important, and actually this is my shameless plug for GoDaddy Agile, and that is the vision that the GoDaddy Agile team has, and that is to put meaningful and high quality software in the hands of our customers at least every 2 weeks, or at least frequently. Right? And how the SDET role supports this is this role really thinks holistically about our products and services. They think end-to-end, they think customer experience. It's not just about the features, but the whole package. They also, in doing that, they focus on the overall quality. So, and Marcel, this is a shout out for you. They think about things like performance. They think about availability, fault tolerance, usability, security, all those great things. And then they also really focus on driving efficiency within the teams, really being able to deliver quickly and with high confidence as we're making changes and adding new features. Next. So it's this last point that I really want to emphasize here. And ultimately, one of the most important things is providing the ability for teams to know as they make changes to their systems and as they add features that they're doing so in a safe way that doesn't negatively impact our customers. And the more we can squeeze and shorten that cycle time, the faster we can iterate, the faster we can improve and deliver to our customers. Also, by doing this, it's much cheaper too, right? By understanding where areas of concern are with the product and the overall health of our systems, we can better and cheaper address those. If we wait for our customers to do our testing for us and tell us what's wrong, costs go way up and we lose a lot of value there. And why I want to point this out is traditionally testing has been seen as something that can slow down the process. Back in the day, it happened after the fact, and honestly, in a lot of ways, was seen as an impediment to deploying and getting features out. And that's not the world we live in now. We really want to drive testing to happen as early in the cycle as possible, in parallel with the development that's going on, and really allow teams to increase their delivery to the customer. So next. So it's also important to talk about some of the challenges teams face that, again, make this role so critical. And the two I want to call out are tech debt, technical debt, and this takes many forms and has, I think, gets overused at times, but many different flavors. But it's important to talk about the challenges that it introduces with teams. And the second one is just the growing complexity of our systems and services as they evolve over time and we add features. Next. So this shows what teams deal with over time. And I'm sure everyone has been in this situation and has seen this happen. When teams start on something and it's a brand new greenfield system, all of your efforts and time are spent on new feature development. And over time, as complexity gets added, as technical debt increases, the time you're spending on delivering new features goes down and down, and to the point, honestly, where sometimes you're struggling just to keep systems running and you're not really advancing that product or service for our customers. Where the SDETs come to play here is that they can help mitigate this and keep as much of that green bar above the line as possible by encouraging things like simple designs, clean code, good peer review practices, and just an overall strategy to mitigate the introduction of technical debt. Next slide. Another thing that is very tightly related, but also happens as well, is that over time, the complexity of our systems, and whether it's through design trade-offs or just the interaction of features and services between each other, is that you see the complexity of a system follows kind of an n-squared increase, whereas often tests follow more of a linear growth over time. And this again is where the SDET comes into play and talk about, and by introducing or focusing on testable designs, using techniques like data-driven automation, and just focusing on customer usage patterns. But there's no real silver bullet here. That's the main takeaway I want to give, which is that having a coherent, thoughtful approach to how we approach test coverage and complexity, that's the way we minimize the gap between the complexity of our systems over time.
Hey, Phil.
I see a couple questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a few questions. Actually, one question from Satya. Can someone talk about some concrete examples of SDETs bringing non-functional testing? And non-functional testing, Satya means usability, performance, accessibility, things like that.
Yeah. No, that's great. So Manoj can give some. I can think of a quick one. Working again with Jim Pearson's team, we have teams that are actually inserting performance tests into their CI/CD pipeline. So as we do this, teams get a sense of not only are we passing our functional tests and our unit tests and all those tests, but how are we impacting performance? The introduction of new relic and things like that also bring in a performance aspect to build pipelines that Scrum teams are using to focus on the non-functional side of things. Manoj, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think specifically performance is one of the key features for any functionality or any product that you're trying to build, and being able to build that into the product through continuous validations and continuous measurements across any code changes definitely helps find issues early on in the stages, whereas traditionally performance has usually been an afterthought, that after the product has been released and we go back and spend a few iterations going back and looking at how the performance has been. But with this role, they definitely want to emphasize and focus and spend a lot more time early in the cycle to find any issues and do that in a continuous fashion as well.
Yep, right, run the money. Compatibility is another non-functional type of testing that I know many teams use. Any team that integrates with Sauce Labs and looks at their UIs across multiple devices, multiple platforms, that's another great example of bringing non-functional testing into the teams and into the build pipeline.
And in some of the companies and some of the products where things like accessibility testing is applicable, I think definitely something to that they think about and bring in ways and mechanism to be able to do that a lot more readily and quickly and easily.
Great. So that hopefully answers the two big why questions that we posed at the start. Manoj is going to take us through some of the specifics on the what.
Sure. So I think as we have seen that definitely this role plays a vital role in being able to deliver a high quality software. What are some of the things or responsibilities or the what's and the hows that help the team to be able to do that? First of all, I want to kind of touch base and reset everybody about what this role is definitely not about. It's not someone who is just able to sit at a computer and click around and find issues in the application or in the code that was just recently added into the product. And I'm going to go into details of the counterpart of some of these things. And obviously, we don't want to consider this as somebody who is always going to do like a QA sign-off and they act as a gatekeeper to be able to deploy changes. In fact, they essentially enable the quality into the product that anybody should be able to deploy their changes into the production environment. So what essentially is a fundamental thing that they deliver as to the team. They focus heavily on customer values or customer experience, not only functional aspect, but as Phil was saying, non-functional aspects, security, performance, reliability, availability. All of those things are things that are always in their mind, and they always bring those things up as we are building features or as we are building a new product. They're always looking to optimize the delivery mechanism on how we are able to deliver software to our customers. So things around CI/CD, how we can integrate small pieces of code into our master branches, how we can continuously deliver those, how we can have enough amount of safety net that we are able to deliver constant value to our customers in a timely way. And overall, how we can test the entire experience. So as an example, building tooling and infrastructure around monitoring, around alerting when things go wrong. So stuff like real user data, stuff like New Relic, stuff like adding logs to our app so that when we know there is a problem, we have enough debugging information to be able to go somewhere and figure out why it's happening and what kind of errors we are seeing and how we can potentially quickly fix it. They think about the entire product as a whole. So when asked to test a particular feature, they look at the design of the product. They look at how the code is actually written to be able to understand what's happening in the code to come up with a better strategy for testing the particular product. There's a lot of background noise coming somewhere.
Yeah, if we could mute. Hey Manoj, I wanted to hit a couple questions I saw in the chat as well.
Sure.
Okay, great. So one, Subhash, I saw what you're saying as far as how empowered are SDETs on the teams to drive testability and quality, and I'd say they're very empowered. This is part of the reason why we're having this talk, honestly, is that we want to make sure we're giving a voice to all of the SDETs out there to have those conversations, make sure they're getting looped in, and we'll go over this a little bit later too, but I want to make sure that these conversations are having and we're talking about testability and building in quality in the early stages, and Manoj has got a great slide, I can't wait till we get to it, that talks about it. The other one that came up, Jake, you had a question as well too, which was, there are teams that either have functioned without a specific SDET on the team. There are a lot of different organizations here at GoDaddy that we're going to talk about too, but the role needs to be played in some form, and it sounds like for your team, you had one, but now you're introducing an SDET. It really is having that conversation of like, where are the gaps? Where are the pain points? We'll drive this point home firmly too is that developers, just as everyone on the team, do own quality, do own that testing, but the SDET role can help provide and make sure there's a coherent strategy around it, and then look at areas that can be filled in. Again, if, let's say, the team isn't leveraging New Relic or understand their production health, the production health of their systems as much as they could, that's an area that an SDET will focus on and look at. So hopefully they answered some of those questions.
I want to add a couple of points to Subhash's question around empowerment. I think empowerment is something that also gets built in the team as you build relationships and as you build things around, tooling, some of the things that we're going to talk about. And when you're talking the same language and the same product, more than empowerment, it's buying and having the relationship to be able to have a say in things and how things are actually being built. So it's something that you build over time, and you build it by doing certain things, by practicing certain things that we're going to talk about in coming slides. So going back to this point, when thinking about a particular product or a particular feature, they think about it holistically, understanding how this particular feature is going to behave, and how we can detect issues before any of our customers are able to find those. So as an example, some of you may actually be familiar with this automation pyramid, where to be able to detect issues earlier, you definitely want to have a lot more coverage at the unit level, and then followed by some type of component test. And if there are cross services or cross API communication happening, then you are able to exercise those as well. And then finally, you want to have some set of UI tests that validate the functionality in the core product, and hence you are able to ensure that these issues are detected a lot more earlier. So I'm going to give a specific example of how we kind of use this general practice to be able to do that. So as part of working on BNext Editor, I was working on a feature where, as a customer, we want to be able to add a contact form on my site using the editor, and then I want to be able to preview it and publish it. And my customer's customer, who are trying to get in touch with the small business, are able to reach out by submitting the form. So obviously there are some moving parts associated with it. So as an example, as a different units in that contact form, I have an email field, I have a name field, message, and I'm able to submit the form. A lot of the validations related to each of the individual fields could easily be done at the unit level. So if I'm submitting a form through an invalid email format, then I should throw an error. So those kind of tests, a lot of times traditionally, we'll end up writing at the UI level, because we want to make sure that all the moving parts are able to respect that. So we can individually test those pieces where we say, this is how the email address is expected, and using TDD, I'm able to write all the positive and negative test cases for each individual field that I'm working on, and ensure that each of the field is going to respect the different values that you can input for that particular field. The second layer in our case was essentially the API that when you submit the form, that is the first entry point that submits the form to an API, and it has the body of the entire form. So we wrote some tests around making sure that when we submit valid entries, invalid entries, we are able to validate different statuses associated with that. So if in this case it did not require any auth, but if it required, then is it actually returning appropriate 400 errors if that is the case? How is it handling different scenarios where I have very long email addresses? Do we get 500 errors in those situations? And being able to validate that it is able to get the required fields, things like that you could easily do at the API level, ensuring that the server or the API is able to handle all those requests appropriately and does not throw an error. Then finally, once we submit the form, then we integrate with the messaging API, which is an external service to our product, but it is still internal to GoDaddy. So we want to make sure that API is respecting all the values. So we wrote some tests around that and ensuring that the messaging API is able to handle the different kinds of requests that we are sending. And eventually we want to validate that our customers are able to get those emails. So we leveraged Gmail, which has APIs, to be able to validate that when a form is submitted, our customers are also able to get the email from published site or from preview site or any other form. And a lot of these were done in a headless way that you don't have to spend a lot of resources and maintenance costs to be able to run those tests. And then finally, at the UI level, in the editor, which is the final integration points, we have some tests that validate that when you change some labels, some name values, or things like that, all the properties that you can apply for the contact form, you are able to verify that as well. And then you are able to submit the form, not necessarily verify that you actually got it, but essentially the editor is able to throw appropriate errors and is able to show an appropriate user experience when different situations are handled in that case, using a data-driven approach for that particular scenario. And then if there are other scenarios that you want to test, so as an example, we don't necessarily need to test that this works on all browsers and all platforms at the same time, but using real user data, depending upon how our customers are actually using and how their customers are using, we can do some manual testing to also ensure that the app works in those scenarios appropriately as well. SDETs are absolutely partners in the code base where the apps are actually written, whether they use the same language or platform or not, but through code reviews, through pair programming with the developers, they should be able to understand the code and how it works. And most often than not, I've seen even doing pair programming and even doing a code reviews, without even touching the actual app, you're able to find bugs in the code. So they're partners in that respect, that they built testability into the product. They build reliability into the product. They essentially build a lot of toolings and frameworks around the product itself to be able to make it a lot more testable, to be able to build quality into the product. So things like, how can we continuously monitor the performance of the app? Well, they are in the code. They can either work with the developer for that particular feature, or they have a good understanding of the code itself that they can go in and put in hooks to be able to easily and readily measure performance, as an example. So things like that help them get the empowerment to be able to build a lot of things to make and improve the quality of the product. They essentially enable quality and not assure quality, that it's not an afterthought. It's a thought that is built into the product when we start thinking about building the features or start building the actual product. So as we have seen, that getting them involved a lot more earlier helps with finding defects a lot more early in the cycle. And the cost of finding bugs early in the development is way more less than finding issues on the right side of the curve. So if our customers, if the code is already in production and finding bugs at that time, the cost of fixing that is in the red zone, as you can see. But if you're pair programming or if you're doing a lot of TDD, then the cost of finding those bugs is very, very minimal. So I think a lot of you may have already seen this, but this kind of depicts some breakpoints of what's an approximate cost of finding a bug at a different stage of different life cycle of the product. So this is one of the slides that I kind of stole from one of our earlier presentations from Mukund, where following some kind of ATDD or TDD, you are able to build tests first, and this could be SDEs or SDETs. building these tests, which are acceptance tests, which could be integration tests or unit tests or UI tests that initially may be failing, but as the sprint progresses, a test passing gives you a significant milestone to be able to deliver value to customers. So as you start getting your test to pass, you're able to continuously deliver quality and functionality to your customers. So we talked about a lot of automation throughout our presentation so far, but I want to also kind of touch base on some of the anti-patterns when thinking about automation, whether at unit level or whether at integration level or at UI level. Starting with UI, since that is one of the challenging aspect in some situations, you definitely want to have page objects. A little background on a page object. So essentially, let's say you have, for simplicity purposes, a multi-page app. For example, checking out on Amazon. So each of the different flows you create as a different page, and then each of the elements that you can interact with on that page are the components of that page. So that entire page becomes one object, and different things that you can do on that page defines a page object. So one of the common practices that we should avoid is having insertions in those page objects, because essentially anytime that function is reused, you are doing additional verifications. Whether it is necessary or unnecessary, you are definitely adding additional cost, not only for maintaining it, but also being able to execute those. So something to watch out for when writing UI tests specifically. Sleeps, where an app is performant in different situations, different areas. So when you're running in your test, as an example in SAS Labs, you see there are performance degradation. So a lot of times we try to put in sleeps, which kind of makes the test wait for a certain event to happen instead of actually having the code to wait for that event to happen. We put in sleeps, which in turn actually makes the test a lot more flaky, because then you have a fixed amount of time that you are going to wait for that to happen, instead of doing an event-based detection of that particular event to happen. Test dependent on each other. So this is one of the things that I have also seen personally in integration tests specifically, where we expect a test previously to be executed before we can execute the second test. That also has some limitations beyond being able to run them in parallel, but we are essentially causing two failures if there is only actually one failure. So a general practice would be to have a test contained in itself, so that if there are any preconditions that the test needs to have, executing that within the test helps it help make it a lot more reliable, and helps with improving the automation coverage for that particular feature. Unmanaged test data is another pattern where a test modifies the data being used in itself in such a way that it could potentially be affecting other tests. So being able to manage the data in itself improves the reliability of those tests. So something to also keep in mind when thinking about integration tests specifically, because if, let's say, there is one common account being used across different integration tests, if it modifies a particular account, and if for some reason, even if at the end of the test you're resetting it, if that test fails, you're potentially causing test failures for other tests as well. Then another pattern to watch out for is trying to automate everything. You got to be mindful about understanding what's the return of being able to automate a particular scenario. In some cases, you could potentially automate that, but needing to be able to run that in a continuous way is way more costly. Then you might want to consider doing that particular test manually, or figuring out better ways of doing that by either pushing that down the stack, where you could have a lot more coverage at the unit level or at the integration level, and so on and so forth. So something to definitely keep in mind when thinking about automation. Another kind of pattern related to that is, a lot of times we add a test, and since that test is always working, it's a good practice to also go back and review your test to ensure that they are exercising the code that is necessary. So if there is some dead code that the app is never going to use or change, then you probably don't need to incur the cost of running that test over and over and again. So something to watch out for as well.
Hey, Manoj.
Yep.
Let me ask, I'm going to answer a couple quick questions that came up. So Jim, you had a great question about the difference between a junior and more senior SDET, and we can talk a little bit more about this, but the main thing is that it is just like any other developer. The junior SDET is really going to be focusing on coming in and learning the code base, starting at a more junior level of writing automation and understanding how best practices for approaching the strategy that the team is. So they're going to be leaning on the more senior developers on the team to have those conversations. As an SDET gets more senior, they're going to be driving more and more of that conversation themselves. This also ties in really well to Jake's question, which is, how do you learn as a new SDET on a team without others to learn from? And that's where we get into more of the, leveraging partners in the SDET community just across the room. That's why we're, like, Manoj and I are not in the same organization, but we spend a lot of time talking about strategies, learning from each other. We have a lot of leaders on the team across the company, whether it's a guy like Scott Creighton in Arizona or Preet in Scottsdale, just across the board, is reach out and find out those communities, or you can take that guild approach, right, of bringing together a community of practice around testing. So that's something we're looking at doing and working on right now. But great question, and please, if anyone has any specifics there, just reach out to Manoj and I after the talk. Did I hit most of those? Anyone else have a question I didn't hit there? All right, I think I covered most of them. Sorry, Manoj, go ahead.
All right, cool. So going back to kind of the transition about automating everything versus being mindful about what you want to automate. So based on hopefully most of the products are now collecting some kind of real user data, analyze how the product is being used, you are able to come up with an appropriate automation strategy. But beyond being able to do some common functionality, more automation does not necessarily always equate to finding a lot more bugs in less amount of time, because a lot of times the product actually behaves slightly differently in real world for different reasons, because the product is being used differently than what a script could actually do. So that's where I think exploratory testing brings in a lot of value, where you're not only able to do a lot of compatibility testing with other platforms or other hard to automate scenarios, but you are actually able to put in a human to verify and ensure that it's a high quality software. So a lot of automation definitely helps expedite and get the products or features to our customers a lot more quickly, but there is always going to be a human aspect that is going to be needed to ensure that we are actually delivering a high quality software, because a lot of things you cannot achieve through automation beyond just compatibility testing. You could build automation, for example, on user experience, saying, oh, this button is overlapping with another thing, it doesn't look good. So from a user experience perspective or usability aspect, it's a little harder to detect through functional automation, but you could build automation to be able to detect that. But again, greatly emphasizing on the fact that what human eye can catch and look and find, automation is going to do only a percentage of that, because it's the humans who dictate what a script should do and not the other way around. So that being said, how would usually a daily life of an SDET look like? A lot of time they would end up spending coding and doing a lot of automation, understanding how the code works, a lot of things around CI/CD, how we can have appropriate processes in place that ensure that we are able to run the right kind of tests at the right time to be able to deliver software to our customers. A good percentage of their time is spent in doing exploratory testing, where a new feature is being worked on. Before you even write automation, you want to ensure that it is in an acceptable state to be able to write UI automation specifically. And then, in some cases, you end up spending a lot of times talking to teams, talking to developers, getting their input, getting their buy-in to be able to move forward and establish not only processes, but tools that help detect issues and prevent issues ahead of time before our customers are able to actually find those. So about 20% of the time, you will usually end up spending that. But this is just a sample. Every SDET could be spending their time slightly differently, but just to give some holistic view of how you would expect, what kind of things to expect from this role specifically is something to keep in mind. With that, I would like to hand it back over to Phil.
Great, thanks, Manoj. And one thing I want to make clear here, I think we're all splitting hairs a little bit. I'm noticing some comments in the chat. We really are talking about there's a bias towards automating as much as you can, as much as makes sense. I think the point Manoj is really driving home is that realizing that don't confuse automation for what it is. Automation isn't the end goal. The end goal is assuring we can move quickly and confidently. So focus on the best approach for a specific instance. There are some teams that are going to be hitting 95, 98% of automation with very little exploratory testing needed because of the nature of their systems. Others are much more prone where that is a critical tool to finding issues that impact our customers. So it's really more about have the conversation, do it in a thoughtful way, and make sure we're coming together and understanding the benefits and the costs of all this.
And also to add to what you said, again, I think this role is extremely vital in that respect because they think about the test design for the product. They don't think about the test design for a particular feature. So if there are things that can be automated and would give us the benefit of actually automating it, first analyzing that and then trying to push those tests as much as low down in the pyramid is going to make it a lot more valuable to have those kind of tests. For some teams, as Phil was saying, for example, if your team is building only APIs, sure, there is absolutely no need to have any kind of exploratory testing. 100% automation is definitely possible. But if your product or feature requires a lot of user interactions, a lot of browser dependencies, and a lot of mobile dependencies, then there is obviously a need and a drive to have some kind of exploratory testing to ensure that even though your feature and product works for 95% of our use cases through automation, you are delivering high quality software to 100% of your customers.
Yep. Great call. Great call, and it's actually worth calling out something that Julio put in the chat, which is, and this I think answers your question, Jim, a little more. The more senior you are, the more senior SDETs will actually look at ways to automate the things that may have been painful to automate in the past. A great example is really senior SDET and one that is a full-on, adding value to the team, to someone that would write a tool like Sauce Labs or something that brings the bar down for doing compatibility testing across devices and allowing for better mobile testing. That's what a senior SDET is looking to do. All right, so in addition to laying out why this role is important and talking about some of the things that SDETs do on a day-to-day basis, it's important to understand the history and the evolution of the SDET at this company, and honestly even just more broadly across the industry. Next slide. So this is a relatively typical evolution, and in addition to being an evolution, you see, this is also a spectrum. And the reason I bring this up is that different teams are at different areas on this curve here. But again, it will depend team by team and what the skill sets are on the team and what the challenges those teams are facing. But if we go back in time quite a ways, testing really was focused initially on manual testing, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Doing manual testing is really easy to do. It's easy to start up. It represents the customer extremely well, and it can provide a lot of value that way. Some of the big problems with this, though, is that it's error prone, it's very labor intensive, and it doesn't scale. Over time, a product that may take 10 hours to test manually, once you add a number of features, a month later it could take 20 hours to test, and that just goes up over time. Automation and being able to automate repetitive tasks is what drove this next progression, which is a lot of when you move from manual testing, you go to these centralized automation teams. It's this idea that, hey, we've got a lot of really repetitive things we're doing. Let's get some people together. We still have manual testing going on. Let's get some people together that can automate these and build tools that enable and help test teams. Well, after that, once you start realizing the benefits you get of automation and all that, that automation routinely gets pushed out into the teams themselves. There's an automation focus within the team. The teams understand they can automate more and more. And then the next step in that evolution is eventually realizing that by going from the initial focus, which may be for a lot of systems purely at the UI level, is taking a more mature approach to that practice and moving towards that automation pyramid that Manoj spelled out, where you're testing at all layers, involving more and more practices and bringing in higher level talent to do and write those that automation and the tools and infrastructure that support that. And then the last part of this curve, the part where we're moving towards, is that in an agile world too, you're integrating all of that work. It's not a separate activity, but you're actually integrating that into the team, where the team owns the quality, and this role is just an enabler, quality enabler on that team to help the team accelerate even more. So next slide, please. So hopefully we've covered most of the things and answered some questions here. I do get a lot of questions, and I know Kuhn, Manoj, others do get a lot of questions. I'd like to just step through some of them and see if we can answer them succinctly here. I get asked a lot, how many SDETs do I need? What's the ratio? What's the perfect ratio between development and test for an SDET? And unfortunately, the answer is it depends. It really, I'd almost say, actually don't focus on how many you need or what the right ratio is, and it's more of what are you trying to solve? What problems are we seeing? What do we need to do to move faster and have higher quality, and really focus on the specific circumstances of any given team. We've already called out that teams that focus more at APIs and the back-end level have different needs than teams that focus on customer-facing applications.
Phil, I want to add a couple of things here specifically. So I think a lot of times people feel that if, and within GoDaddy, I think I know there are a couple of teams that do have that they follow certain practices that help them build the required kind of automation and tests from the word go, from a feature perspective, because there are a lot of people on the team who are developers and they want to push for writing as many tests as possible. On the flip side, I think a lot of times having this as a different role is essentially a different kind of skill that not necessarily brings in just the processes part of how to write, but also the test design aspect of it, whether to say this kind of test we're going to write at unit level. A lot of times developers stop at that point and think that having a test at that level is going to be enough. I think this role specifically calls out that there are possibilities because they have that skill to be able to think for the entire feature or the entire product as a whole. So in some teams, there may not be a need because there are people who have the skill set to be able to think beyond just specific types of tests. But in some teams, this role just brings in that which adds a lot of value, essentially. Great
call, Manoj. So next one is what's the difference between a tester and an SDET? We get this a lot too. Again, really the focus here, hopefully it's been made clear, testers really focus on writing and running tests. That's their primary responsibility, and it adds a lot of value to the team. SDETs, though, think even more broadly. They'll focus on the end-to-end experience. They'll focus, and Julia, actually, I was talking with him earlier today. He had a great call out. SDETs, especially really valuable ones, are the ones that write the tools that help teams move faster. They're the ones that think of tools like, again, like Sauce Labs, or that wrote the framework that literally the entire world uses to automate UI systems, things like that. Next one. So what's the difference for SDETs in an agile world? This is another great question, and this kind of speaks to that evolution we were talking about. And this is, in an agile development system, the focus really isn't, again, not on getting a handoff from a development team in a waterfall model, but it's really about what can I do to add tests and automation and increase upstream the way for the team to know, are we building things correctly, and are we hitting the value that we want to deliver to our customer, and doing it in a really quick, iterative way so that we can reduce that cycle time and really understand the health of our systems. Next. All right, so who owns quality? Hopefully everyone can answer this right now, but it's the team. Again, the SDET is not the quality person. They're not the one that is the gate between developing a feature and getting it out to production. The team owns quality, and again, they're really there to enable that for everyone. And then last question. So I get this often as well too, although thankfully it happens less and less. But all right, so my SDET's out, we have it on the team. Who's going to test when the SDET's not available? Again, I think Phil did a great job earlier of calling this out. He mentioned that if things, the tests are written in an accessible way, and the team is coached up and has worked and has a coherent quality plan, it's really easy. The team will take over that testing if the SDET happens to be on vacation or out for some reason. All right. So we're doing good on time, but I want to have, before we finish this, I want to give everyone 3 primary takeaways from this talk. So the first one is really understanding that the SDET is a development role on the team. They're there not necessarily writing product code, but they're writing the code that helps the product move faster, that helps the team move faster, that enables all this. They also are the ones that write the infrastructure and tools to really have a great understanding of where your product is. Second big takeaway is really understanding that our products and our services are more than just the individual features. Really encouraging, and this happens a lot of times through the SDET, but encourage teams to think holistically and end-to-end. Really, it's about the customer experience, whether it's about performance, about the security of our systems, how they scale, how they handle error conditions and faults. That's the focus that I want teams to have, is understanding that their products are more than just individual features. And then lastly, want to understand, everyone understand the impact this means to the development teams and development engineers themselves. So the 3 things I want you to focus on here, on this last point, are first off, partner with your SDET. Reach out to them, talk to them. Even if you don't have that specific role in the team, look around and see who's playing that role. This role exists. It's on every team. Someone is playing it in some sense. Make sure you're having that conversation. The second point here is just looping the SDET in early to make sure that they understand how the product's getting built, how it's getting designed, and that you're collaborating on that quality strategy. And then just lastly, please use this talk as a catalyst to drive that conversation. Be great to bring up either in a retro or just in a stand-up or team meeting at some point. Just say, hey, have we sat back and thought how we're integrating quality in this role and leveraging it to maximum effect? Jake, this would be a great thing to call out at your next team meeting. We've got this new SDET on our team. How are we integrating this person into our systems? So That's it. We have, if anyone wants to participate in conversations around just the role in general, or tools, or what's happening at GoDaddy from a testing and SDET perspective in general, here's the Slack channel. You can all join. With that, I'm going to turn it over to any other questions that we haven't answered yet.
Hey, Phil, I like Satya's question. Can an SDET report into a dev manager?
Hey, that's a great question, and the answer is we've seen it. We see it in some teams here at GoDaddy. I think it's fine. The kind of things you want to ask about are, does the dev manager understand the role? Does the dev manager support this role and the kind of things we talked about? Great thing would be to go to that manager and say, hey, did you see that talk? Or what are your thoughts on how we approach quality and how we approach automation on the team? And again, also leverage others around. If you want to have those deep discussions about quality and what it means, talk with your team, but talk to other SDETs in the group. Reach out to me, Makoum, Julio's passionate about this. Pri, Manoj, we've got people across the entire org that are really passionate about this.
I think the important caveat that you definitely mentioned is that the manager or the leader on the team needs to have that understanding of this specific skill set and this specific role, that they value that, and definitely it's possible. I mean, I have done that, and it's very much possible, and it's a good thing to have.
Great. Other questions? Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much. Thank you very much for keeping us on our toes and asking great questions and pushing it. I love it. I think we've struck up some great conversations. Anyone want to continue this discussion, please reach out to Manoj, myself, or anyone else on the SDET side. I'd love to chat with you about it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.